Hey friends, Kent Marts here from Explore Scientific. Welcome to today's Amazon live broadcast. It's Wednesday, as you probably know, which makes this First Light Chronicles. First Light Chronicles focuses on starting astrophotography and how to get, not astrophotography, how to get started in astronomy. And we named it after the series of telescopes. This telescope is the First Light achromatic 80 millimeter. Sir?
It wouldn't take Amazon, and I had to fight with it to get it to go.
So are we on Amazon now?
We're on Amazon right now, yeah.
Okay, so I'll start over. Hello, everybody. False start.
Hello.
And I'm Kent Marts with Explorer Scientific. It's Wednesday, making today First Light Chronicles. First Light is the
7/6/2022. Just so you know that we are actually live.
What he just said. Absolutely.
Because we have been, we were asked that see if we were actually live the other day, and I'm like, no, we're live.
Yeah, we're live. So if you ask a question, we answer it. Chances are we're live.
So Connor Bradley did ask a question before we had to go last time. He says, hi, I've got Bresser Messier 1271, or I, which is 7 kilograms on my EQ5 mount, which is 9 kilograms. Is this scope fine on the EQ5, giving them it's under the weight limit of the mount?
It's the Bresser what scope did they say it was?
127I?
It's be 127 millimeter telescope. Not familiar with that telescope, Connor. If you're watching, not familiar with it, sorry. The question came in right as we were shutting down. Otherwise, we would have tried to answer it.
Yeah.
What, Thursday?
No, just a minute ago.
Oh, just a minute ago. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so this is not one from last week. Okay.
No.
As long as it's under the stated weight capacity, it's a, what was the amount, Paul?
EQ5?
You know, I'm going to take a stab in the dark here. The EQ5 probably has a stated weight capacity that includes the counterweights. So if it says it's, I'm going to use 10 kilograms, which would be 22 pounds. If it's stated as 10 kilograms, you're going to want to have 40% of that accounted for by the counterweights, which means you would be able to use, let's just say, 6 kilograms, or whether it be 13 and a half, 14 pounds of telescope and astronomy or
he says
photography gear.
His scope is 7 kilograms.
7 kilograms, you should be fine. It's going to be close. If you're doing astrophotography, you want to be really careful with your balance and make sure you're and manage your balance well. I don't shoot for perfect balance. I shoot for a little bit eyepiece heavy and a little bit counterweight heavy. Just a little bit, not so it goes whoop, but just a little bit. I want a little bit heavy on both. The reason being, that allows you to manage the teeth of the gear so it's always engaged. If you have a perfect balance, there are situations where the teeth of the gear that drive the system get disengaged. So they're actually in a gap between the teeth. If my fingers are the teeth, it's pushing down, pushing down, pushing down. Well, at some point, it can get to where the teeth are nowhere and the telescope actually stops moving for a little bit. That can present some challenges. You accomplish that by having a little bit of weight on one side or the other. You can have it objective heavy and counterweight heavy if you want to. You can have it objective heavy and telescope heavy if you want to. The trick is to just manage that weight well. I think at 7 pounds with astrophotography, you're going to be fine on that mount. I don't have any experience with that mount. I am absolutely shooting from the hip and guessing it. Paul, I don't have them show up on the monitor over here. If you could,
I can't do everything, Kent.
I know. I just want to let you know that it was there, and so you can get it on your platter of not important things to get to. So I think that answers your question. If you're doing visual, you'll be fine with that telescope on a EQ5 mount. That's again another brand, not a brand we sell, but I think you'll be fine with that.
So Pekka wants to know from our previous supplemental stream, does the PCM show a warning when tapping sun when choosing it from the go-to list?
No. We can just do it real quick. I've got it running right now. I don't know if we're connected or not because I disconnected a while ago when I changed batteries. Let's go to Wi-Fi, PMC8. So the PMC8 system is the name of the operating system that runs a couple of our mounts. This is the IEXOS 100, and it has the PMC8 system on it. The other one right now is the Exos 2 GT with PMC8. There's more in the pipeline out there. So I'm connected up now with my tablet. This is an iPad. You have to have a screen of at least 7 inches on an Android tablet or a Windows tablet or an iPad, or be using a Windows desktop or laptop computer running Explore Stars. You can find it in the Google Play Store, the Microsoft App Store, and the Apple Apps Store. You can also connect up wired with a laptop computer and run it wired, which we advise people to do if they're going to do astrophotography. If you're not doing astrophotography, using Explore Stars works great. So I've connected up my tablet to the mount. There's a Wi-Fi signal in here that broadcasts out just like your home router does. Your home router is connected up to the internet. This is not. It's just broadcasting a Wi-Fi signal so we can connect up and communicate. So on a Windows machine, you're going to get no internet detected or something like that. Well, yes, because there's no internet coming out of this. So people sometimes get worried about that. No need to get worried about that. So now I'm going to launch Explore Stars, and I'm just going to go check it real quick, pull the virtual. There we go. See it moving? I'm going to pull the virtual. Yep, there it goes. Virtual joystick. I'm going to let it quit moving. And people here, I don't know if you can hear that sound because of the noise cancellation, but it makes sort of a musical da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That is the sound of the circuit boards and the stepper motors managing the weight distribution. If you just went full speed, it's going to cause backlash and management control of the telescope. But when you ramp up the speed and then run it, and before it gets to where it's going to stop, you ramp down to speed, that lets the momentum slow down the telescope, so when it gets to the right spot, it just settles in nicely, just gently into that spot. So Pekka asks, does it give a warning when you go to the sun? Let's find out. Going through the menus to solar, to sun, suit object. No, it does not. Certain assumptions that you know what you're doing. Well, that might be something to put in a future iteration, I guess. So here we go. The telescope is going to turn itself using micro stepper motors. They're counting micro steps. So the telescope, when you turn it on, the program assumes that you have a good polar alignment. The telescope counterweight rod is straight down, and the telescope is pointed at the north celestial pole or the southern celestial pole, because this will work in the southern hemisphere as well. It's smart. It knows where its location is from the tablet. If not, you can enter that information manually, and it knows which way to go depending on the hemisphere you're in. Obviously, in the northern hemisphere, you make sure you're pointed very close to Polaris. If you can't see Polaris in your eyepiece, you've got a problem. You need to move your telescope to where it'll get in the eyepiece. So it starts out assuming that it's got a good polar alignment and the telescope is pointed at Polaris with a motor count of 0, 0. And you tell it where to go. It knows exactly which way to turn and the numbers of micro steps to go to get to that spot. What you got, Paul?
So first thing you got to do is the polar alignment, right?
Absolutely. And here goes a video.
All right, hang on. This silly thing. I've been having nothing but problems with it all day. Wow. When it goes down, doesn't it?
That's the way things work, Paul. Teach you how to polar align your telescope using a broom. Why do you need to polar align? Well, with a telescope that has an equatorial mount, you have to get that equatorial axis lined up with the rotation of the Earth. And to do that, we're going to start with the tripod. We're going to decide which one of these legs is going to point north, and we're going to set the tripod down so that leg is pointed north. First thing I'm going to do is use a level to make sure my tripod is level, so if it's tipped one side or the other, that's going to cause your polar alignment to not be accurate. So we're going to use a level for that purpose. Then we're going to take a compass, and just to make sure that I've got it pointed north, I'm going to use the compass, line up, and go, yep, that looks like it's pointed north. So here's what I'm going to do now. And this is where the broom comes in. The broom becomes a measurement device, if you will. So I'm going to put the broom on the ground with the tip of it right against the north leg of the tripod. And I'm going to back away, and I'm going to use the compass. I'm going to close one eye, and I'm going to use the compass to make sure that the broom is lined up with north, right? And so I can tell I'm off just a little bit. So I'm going to move the tripod just a little bit, and I'm going to turn the broom. And the broom is what I'm seeing that line with to line up. So closing one eye, now my broom is lined up perfectly to magnetic north. Right here is we're going to talk about something called magnetic declination. The magnetic north is not true north. The difference between true north and magnetic north can be off by as much as 15 or 16 degrees if you live on the east coast or west coast of the United States. Around the world, it varies. And you have to figure out what that is for where you live. Because if you point at magnetic north, you're not going to be pointing at true north. You could be off by 15 degrees. Your go-to will never be accurate. So for this system to work, you have to know what that offset is and be able to program that into your compass. We're going to provide a link to a website and a video that talks about that a whole lot more. Now, we're going to make sure that the tripod is not angled wrong. I'm going to use a small tape measure, and we're simply going to come down here and be careful not to move the broom, and I'm going to measure the distance from the tripod leg to the center of the broom. That is 470 centimeters. That way, it is 470, a little, I'm going to call that good. Actually, I'm going to move the tripod a couple of millimeters, just like that. So now we know that we're lined up true north with that leg, and these two legs are the equal distance from right here. So it's not pushed that way or that way. So now that we have the tripod with a good alignment to the north, we have to put the head on the mount. And that's going to entail this. We're going to be very careful when we do this because we don't want to move the tripod. We're going to put it on and simply screw on the polar head just like this. Remembering everything's going to the north. Now if you're in the southern hemisphere, you're going to do the same thing. You can do the exact same in the southern hemisphere because it's not polar, it's polar alignment. We just don't use the star Polaris, which we're not using here. This is really good if you can't see Polaris, or if it's daytime and you want to do some solar viewing with a solar safe filter. So the last step of this process is to check the scale of your altitude, right? So we live at 36 degrees north, and I am going to turn the altitude until it gets to 36 degrees north. I'm going to stop, and that's it. With this system, using a broom, a compass, and a tape measure, you can achieve a good, decent starting polar alignment. Personally, I've used this, and I've got an amazingly close polar alignment. There's ways that you can use to refine your polar alignment, specifically drift alignment, but it all starts with a good polar alignment. You can do this in the daytime. You can do this in the nighttime if you can't see Polaris. It works all the time. It's a good way to get started learning the process of polar alignment. Isn't that great? I hope you've enjoyed this video. For Explore Scientific, I'm Kent Marts. Get out there and start doing astronomy.
and keep
Hey
looking
everybody,
up.
back here, got a late queue. Time to wipe my eyes. So, anyway, that's how you polar line with a straight edge, and I used a broom because, you know, has some fun impact there. A yardstick, a board, anything will do. I've actually just lined up my eyeball with it, the mount, and had it turned left and right just to get it polar lined. Okay. Tommy Wachirano, FC from Thailand. Hello, Tommy. Hope you're having a great day, and thanks for letting us know you're there. And got another one coming here. Hello, Kent. How are you doing? That's from B. Don't know who B is because the name didn't come. Oh, there it is. I see it. I'm seeing it. Beatrice. Hi, Beatrice.
Come on, Kent.
I'm doing great. We had
you can do
we
this.
celebrated Treason Day here in the United States on Monday. That would be for our British friends. You know, July the 4th, Independence Day here in the United States.
Kent was telling us before the show that 1970 was actually the 60s.
It absolutely is. There was no zero, Paul. Look it up.
It's not zero.
There was no year zero.
It's
It went
not
from
years.
1 BC
It's
to
not
1 AD.
zero.
There was no year zero.
It's 0.1 BC or AD. 0.2 AD.
No, there was no year
0.3 AD.
No? Sorry, look
Yeah.
it up. Look it
Yeah.
up. No year zero in the system. Year 1, year 2, year 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, year 10. 1970 would
No.
be the 10th year of the 60s.
No, it's the finish of year 0, which is year 1.
There was no year zero.
There is a year
No,
1.
there's no year zero.
You're insane.
January, all you got to do is
January is 0.1.
Howdy, Kent. Find that and prove it, right, on the internet.
Point
Howdy,
one.
Kent, and everybody who's watching. Hello, Pekka. Hope you're doing well in Sweden. So we've got an international audience today. We have Thailand. We have Pekka from Sweden and Beatrice from Belgium. Amazing group of people we gather up for these broadcasts. So we're talking about the
Point
IXOS
2,
100. And I have
point
a first
3, 0.4, 0.5. It goes to 0.12, and at 0.12 it rolls over to 1.0,
Except it didn't do that.
1.1.
It didn't do that.
That's what it does.
Okay, you weren't in charge, so it does it. Sorry.
Yes, it does.
Pope, that would be Pope Julian,
Julian?
I believe.
The J is silent in Italian.
No, it wasn't Pope Julius. It was Julius Caesar. He was in
Julius?
charge. Created
Julius
the
Caesar?
Julian calendar. Then Pope Gregory created the Gregorian calendar. Do I have that backwards? Anyway,
I don't know.
enough of that. Learning how to do a good polar alignment helps you use an equatorial mount fully. It's a little bit confusing on the front end. There are easier mounts to use, but they're less powerful. And we're going to talk about one of those here in a few minutes.
So I guess Connor missed the comment about the 7 kilograms.
Connor, hi, I've got a Bresser Messier 127L or I, 7 kilograms on an EQ5, 9 kilogram capacity. Is the spine on this mount? I'm not familiar with which brand of EQ5. I think I know. If it has a 9 kilogram capacity, let's just say 10 for easy math, right? That'd be 22 pounds. So 9 would be, 20 pounds? 9 kilograms would be 20 pounds. So yours is 14, 17. Going to be close. For visual, I don't think you're going to have any problem at all. For astrophotography, potentially there is going to be maybe a weight issue because that mount probably has an unwritten rule of half of the stated capacity is accounted for by counterweights. Explore Scientific mounts no longer use that method. We actually state you can use X number of pounds of telescope and gear, which doesn't include counterweights. On all our future mounts are going to have that mechanism and that statement about how much you can use and what our recommendations are. So our recommendation for this mount, well, to answer your question, I think you'll be fine. If you're going to do astrophotography, I think you need to manage your balance really well. That may mean this is what I do personally, counterweight heavy and eyepiece/camera heavy. Tyler does front end heavy and telescope heavy. That's fine, however you do it. You just want to do it the same way every time, and you want it to be a little bit heavier and not in perfect balance, because that ensures the teeth are always either lifting or lowering the weight, not in a position where the gears are going back and forth and actually teeth are not engaged for a period of time. So you want to try and manage that load that way. I think you'll be fine. We rate the IXOS 100 right here for 9 pounds for astrophotography. I have a friend out there who may be lurking, JR, he's probably lurking. He may give us a shout out here in a minute, who is running a Maxitov 180 millimeter telescope, a Maxitov Cassegrain, 180 millimeter telescope that weighs in with cameras and everything right at 24 pounds. And he has added on 18 pounds of counterweight onto here on the counterweight shaft. And he does planetary with it to great success. Obviously, with a planetary, you're shooting bright objects, you're going to have more success than if you're trying to shoot deep sky objects with a rig like that. But I think you can pull it off if you're managing your balance and using a guide scope to keep things well centered up. That's my guess. We say 9 pounds. You can exceed the speed limit if you want to. So some
Just
people talk about
the warranty may not.
But
you
we'll
know.
never know. You just.
I'm just saying.
You may wear out
take a
your
risk.
gears. You may wear out some load-bearing surfaces faster. Would probably be the most dramatic part of it that you could cause some injury to it. But the motors can handle it as long as it's balanced. You know, there's a telescope at McDonald Observatory. The Struve telescope has a 6-foot mirror. It's run by half horsepower motors. You know, and it weighs tons and tons, but it's perfectly balanced, or they have the balance perfect. And so small motor with a good gearing system can handle it, no trouble. Some people want to add, and I've seen people add 1.5 feet or 2 feet of extensions onto the counterweight rod. We don't advise that because, one, it can create leg strikes at certain points, and two, it creates what's called a whip arm or a very long moment arm. Yes, you can use couple counterweights way out there and achieve the leverage, but you also have this big long rod that'll bounce, and that bouncing on go-to can take minutes and minutes and minutes to settle down. It's better to add more weights than it is to increase your moment arm or your whip arm because you're creating a situation that's going to be harder to overcome by doing that. So this is a great mount. As you can see, I have a telescope on it, and this is our First Light AR-8640 telescope. It comes with a red dot finder that you can see right here. It comes with the diagonal, which allows the light to bounce off a mirror and come out here. So instead of having to get down here and look through the telescope, you can look at the eyepiece in a much more easily accessible point. This tripod is not raised up all the way. So it'll show up easier on the camera or on the set and on the video camera. Additionally, for astrophotography, my recommendation is you put it all the way down, so there's no reason to have it up high because you can, unless you're looking at the visual back of the camera, there's no reason to have it up high. And by doing it lower, you lower the center of gravity, you reduce vibration and things like that. So if you're out there, we would love for you to give us a shout out, ask us a question. We love to answer questions here on the broadcast. So this is actually a package you can buy on Amazon Live. It's over in the carousel right now. And we sell the telescope and the mount together. It's a fantastic package for people who are wanting to get started, don't really know the night sky. You're going to have to learn how to polar line. But again, if you have a compass, a good compass, and a friend, it's easy to do with a friend sometimes as well. From Beatrice, is a Maxitov better for imaging observing planets than a Newtonian? Maxitovs, Schmidt Cassegrains, Maxitov Cassegrains, Ritchie Creightons, things like that, have very long focal lengths. that lend themselves to planetary more than Newtonians do. Because they both have a central obstruction, the contrast is going to be reduced a little bit. I know people that use both for them. The advantage is, you can get a Maxitov or a Schmidt-Cassegrain 1900 millimeter focal length, 2100, 2500 millimeter focal length, and JR, who has this mount with the Mac 180, regularly does planetary astrophotography in the 5,000 to 7,000 millimeter range. So he will be using a 3x or 5x Barlow or focal extender to achieve that. And he has done some pretty nice astrophotography with it. He approaches it from a very scientific standpoint. He changes one variable and studies it extensively to make sure what's going on. And then he logically goes to another variable to change, and really takes a very scientific, methodical engineering approach to trying to figure it out. Instead of just changing a bunch of stuff and trying it, and changing a bunch of stuff and trying it, he will be very precise in what he's doing. From Pekka, question: does PMC8 iPad app warn you when going on Salute to the Sun? I just saw an earlier broadcast and Kent didn't say if it got a warning from software or not. It does not. It will Salute to the Sun or anywhere else you tell it to go to. It won't go below the horizon, but it will Salute to the Sun without a warning on it. Something to consider maybe in the future. Another question from Annie. Kenton, Tyler, and I could not agree on what the telescope is behind you. Can you please let us know what it is? Are we talking about that one? Or are we talking about...
No.
That's the one behind me. Well, there's a Galileo scope.
That one.
That telescope.
That telescope.
Is... We'll just go ahead and move that telescope in. Let me just park it and we'll just talk about it. Someone go ahead and tell the telescope to park. There, it's going to go back. It will keep tracking the point that I sent it to. If it's not quite centered up on your target, you can use the left, right, up, down buttons. Easy cheesy, lemon squeezy. And once you got it centered up, you can hit the sync button, and now it knows you've told it I am pointed directly at this object, and it will stay there. Beatrice, interesting, Kent. Thank you for your response. Beatrice, glad you asked it. If you're thinking the question and ask it, there's other people who have the same question and they haven't asked it. So I appreciate that very much. So I'm going to rotate this out. Where am I going to put this? There's too much stuff in the way.
Straight back.
I'm going straight. Put it over in the corner? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that.
Look at that. It's like there was a spot for it the whole time. Just saying.
There we go. All right, now I can't get through this other telescope. Okay, so Annie and Tyler, for those of you who don't know, Annie and Tyler work here at Explore Scientific, and they couldn't tell exactly what this telescope was. Behind me, this telescope is, get it up here on the stage, effectively positioned where you can see it. This telescope is a First Light series, 102 millimeter, meaning it has a objective diameter of 102 millimeters. Pop off the dew shield. Diameter of 102 millimeters in here. You look down the lens, there you go, and see that. There you go, 102 millimeter diameter.
We are effectively looking at the ceiling.
Yep, you're looking at the ceiling. See, there's my hand right there. Because there's no eyepiece in here.
You're almost right. You got it wrong, though.
And it has a focal length of 600 millimeters. So the telescope we were looking at a few minutes ago on the Exos 100 was an 80 millimeter. This is 102 millimeters. Because it's bigger around, it's going to bring in more light. Okay. Additionally, it has a focal length of 600 millimeters, not 640 millimeters. So it's got a little bit shorter, which those two things combined, bigger diameter and a little bit shorter focal length, is going to make the image in the eyepiece look a little bit brighter than in the other one. More aperture means more photons getting squished down to the same size. Shorter focal length, you know, the equation of light means it's a little bit closer, it's going to be a little bit brighter. Ha! They were both wrong. Annie, why am I not surprised you were both wrong? That's the fun part. What did you think it was? Let us know. Question, how in the free choice can the earlier mount find Venus when it is not even polar aligned or even pointed in north? Does PMC-8 have built-in electronic compass? No, Peck, it doesn't. You have to have it polar aligned to get it to work. You can't just plunk it down like you can this mount.
I think Pekka got really, really lucky.
Huh?
Because he plopped it down and it went to Venus. So I think he just got really, really lucky.
I think he's asking this question. I don't think he has a PMC-8 system. Oh. So you can plunk this down. It's left, right, up, and down. Real simple mount. Great for beginners. Not as powerful as a equatorial mount. We'll talk about that. We haven't talked about why.
I get the question now. So let's put that back up on the screen. I get it. So how did it know to go to Venus if it wasn't polar aligned? Well, all the settings are already in. So it assumes that it's polar aligned.
Correct. The mount makes the mount. The program in here has three assumptions. The mount is level, right? It's level on the ground. Assumption number one. Assumption number two. It's polar aligned and pointing it at the north celestial pole or the south celestial pole. Assumption number three, the telescope is pointing at the north celestial pole or the south celestial pole. Those are the three assumptions it makes, and then you have to have your time and your longitude and your latitude set correctly. On the iPad, it just sets it correctly. It just pulls it off of the settings.
It also assumes the fourth thing. That fourth thing is that you've got the correct inclination.
Well, that's polar aligned. Yeah, that's part of it. But yes,
yeah.
I mean, to get polar aligned, you have to have it the correct altitude set. Your latitude has to be programmed in.
Well, not necessarily is that polar. I mean, it is polar alignment, but it's something you usually set before you start to polar align, because you know your latitude.
And you fine tune it. Yeah, and you fine tune it to polar align. Yeah. So that you got your to polar align, you have to have your latitude, which is the angle of the mount, correctly for your latitude where you live. Annie thought it was a 60 millimeter. Tyler thought it was an 80 millimeter. Wow. You're both way off. So if you just put the mount on the soil at night, at black night, not PA or even pointed north, it will find whatsoever. It won't find anything.
Yeah, it won't find anything at all.
It can't look. It's making the assumption, those assumptions, that it's polar aligned, which means you've got it pointed to the north celestial pole, which means you've got the left, right set correctly, and the up, down set correctly. Up, down being the latitude where you live. That you can see the north celestial pole in your eyepiece, which means you can see Polaris in the eyepiece. You can get more precise than that, but on earlier broadcasts, Kent said the mount wasn't polar aligned, but it found Venus anyway. Okay, so I think that was Mars is what we're talking about, but it did go to Venus at one point. It only found it because I said it found it, because I had it pointed that way. That direction's not north.
No, that way.
That way is north. Directly, the camera and I are lined up effectively close to due north. So the wall in this building is running east and west. So the front of the building is running east and west. So the north-south walls run true north-south. Had the mount been turned correctly, it would have gone either very close or to Venus, depending on how well I had it polar aligned.
Yes, Pekka, this is just Hollywood.
Yes, Pekka.
We are limited by where our set is.
Yeah.
Plus, we're inside with no view of the sky, so it wouldn't matter even if we had a perfect polar alignment, because all you'd see is drywall.
Or ceiling tiles. 3x5, 2x3 ceiling tiles.
It's kind of a moot point in the studio to try to get it right, because it doesn't matter.
Right, because you can't, I mean, in TV land, you can't tell whether I have it polar aligned or not.
Right.
The proof is in the plum pudding when you go out and do it. And,
I don't want plum pudding,
plum pudding
Kent.
is good.
I don't want it.
What kind of pudding do you want?
Chocolate.
Chocolate.
Oreo.
Chocolate Oreo with Oreo.
Sugar-free Oreo would be better. That way I wouldn't feel guilty.
Sure. I understand that.
At least we're not making Jell-O out of horses anymore.
What are they making it out of?
I don't know, but it's not horses.
Hooves. And
Not
they
anymore. Used to be.
Isinglass, air bladders from a couple of different species of fish was the original, that and cow hooves and horses' hooves and other parts.
They don't do that anymore.
The cattle. I bet they do.
I bet you they don't.
I don't know.
You know how much people would be up in arms if they still did that?
I think they do.
I don't think they do.
I think they do because look, they use everything but the moo on the cow. Just like a pig, they use everything.
They
but
use
the
the
wing.
moo.
They use everything but the wing.
They use the moo to know where they're at night and during the morning.
Yeah, but when we're in the Jell-O factory, they're not mooing any longer. All right, so moving along. This is a great telescope. Big, nice, bright, easy to point. Left, right, up, and down. Very intuitive. You look up in the sky and you use the red dot finder to find your subject in the sky. Let's talk about that a little bit.
It's a myth. It's been a myth the whole time.
What's a myth?
It's often rumored that Jell-O is made from horse or cow hooves, but this is incorrect. The hooves of these animals are primarily made up of keratin, a protein that cannot be made into gelatin.
Okay, so when you cook a chicken and boil it down to make stock, all that
That's
floppy
just the
stuff,
fat.
That's gelatin.
You're just after the fat.
The white stuff's the fat. The clear stuff's gelatin. I'm telling you. Isinglass, air bladders from fish. So you align the red dot finder simply by finding something in the evening sky. You want to do it in the evening because you can't see the red dot finder, right? I'm going to turn it this way. And we've got no eyepiece here, but hey, that's okay. It's Hollywood. You can imagine it.
We don't need an
Eyepiece here.
eyepiece.
You point the telescope at something that's easy to see. That's the farthest away thing you can see that's on terrestrial on Earth. You want to find, like a radio tower, a unique tree. Miles is better than yards, okay? And you center it up in the eyepiece. And then you look through the red dot finder, and you turn it on, obviously. And you use two little screws to move it left, right, and up and down until you have the red dot on top of, we'll say, the very tip of a dead branch on a tree that's 5 miles away. And then you look through the eyepiece, because, you know, you can move the telescope a little bit. And if you move the telescope, you just center it back again, right? And use those and keep doing that until you've got the red dot looking at the same spot the telescope's looking at. Now, when it gets dark, here's the magic of a red dot finder. Really cool. What happens is, because the red dot finder is looking where the telescope is, when you point the red dot finder at something, the telescope looks at what the red dot finder's pointing at. It's the same way, right? And now, if you've done a good job, you're going to find the moon tonight, right? Or Arcturus, or, you know, pick your star, Vega, whatever. If it's too close, you're going to be able to find it in the eyepiece and maybe move it and center it up. Then you need to fine-tune the red dot finder again to fine-tune it so it's more precise in its alignment. That's a skill you have to learn when you use a telescope with a red dot finder. No matter what kind of red dot finder, you still have to do that same thing. So over in the carousel today, we've got a lot of other stuff as well. We have a new reflex sight out, and if you have a telescope already that uses a mini Vixen dovetail or an Explore Scientific telescope that has our 2-in-1 hybrid finder on it, the reflex sight is a fantastic zero power item that has 3 circles, half a degree, 2 degrees, and 4 degrees that allows you to turn the brightness way down and then center up your objects. I really like that style of finder. Pekka, in my opinion, that scope is the minimum scope you buy to a newbie kid who starts astronomy. No toy, because that kind of material can destroy their interest. Pekka, you know, Scott will debate you on that point. He started out with I think it was a 40 millimeter Kmart telescope with a zero power soda straw. It wasn't really a soda straw, but it might as well have been. Finder scope on it, and that sparked his interest, and that's why I'm sitting here talking to y'all today, is because Scott at age 10 became fascinated with that telescope, was excited about what it did, and he grew from there. Now, in today's modern people, yeah, they want instant gratification, and some toy telescopes may not fit that bill. Ramesh Bahadri, Ramesh, I'm sorry I've butchered your name. I purchased the Exos 2 PMC8 recently and found the polar scope reticle to be too difficult to align. Do you have any videos on that? No, we don't. We've talked about making it. And when you say, I want to ask a question and get a response here. When you say too difficult to align, do you mean to get it aligned with the polar axis of the telescope, or to align it correctly for the hour angle of Polaris? So what I mean is, the question is, you've got a polar axis that runs through it, right? And if you just stick it in, it could be pointed off at like this, right? So you have to polar align the right ascension, or the polar axis, so the polar scope matches the polar alignment, and then you have to turn the right ascension to rotate it with the hour angle of Polaris. So there's a couple of skills involved there. Reply back, and we'll see if we can get that
clarified
for
just
you.
a touch.
Clarify it, and it may be a case of you need to chat us offline, and we can maybe help you a little bit offline as well. The problem is, doing a video on that can be somewhat difficult because we don't have a camera that we can attach to the finder scope and, you know, show what it looks like and what we're doing. We've talked about doing it for a while. We need to do it.
I have to animate it by hand, and that can take several days.
At least. I think something like this would maybe take longer than that. So go ahead and reply back, Ramesh, with an answer, so we have a little bit more guidance as well. Okay, here it comes. We got it coming back in. It's from Pekka. Pekka started 47 years ago with broken binoculars, and after that a 30 by 30 pirate scope. Today I own 10 different scopes, 6 mounts, and it's a never-ending story. Yes, Pekka, it's very easy to go down the rabbit hole and spend a lot of money. You know, I see a lot of people do it, and I see some people that buy one telescope and they're happy for life.
Ramesh?
At time, my scope is at the bottom and CW on top. Okay, so polar align without the counterweights on it and without the telescope. That's what I do, because it gets very cumbersome with the telescope in the way at times. So let's talk about it a little bit. The Earth does not rotate exactly 360 degrees in 24 hours. It rotates 360 degrees in approximately 3 minutes and 56 seconds. So the sky changes on average 4 minutes, which means over the course of the year, the hour angle of Polaris changes at the same time every night. And at times, Polaris is straight down in the finder scope, which means to get it there, you have to turn the telescope all the way over, rotate the polar axis all the way. Okay, so it's going to look like this. Let me get this telescope out of the way.
He says it's also difficult to determine the position of Polaris.
Let me get this over here real quick.
Put it more in the middle.
I'm going to rotate this a little bit
You can
more.
move the box.
Are we in focus? Close
Yeah.
enough? Okay. I don't have an Exos 2 anywhere. We had one in the showroom, but here in the studio, but got
They
moved.
operate virtually the same.
They operate the same, except for the polar scope. Okay, so I use an app. Can I say the name of the app, Noah?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, so I use an app called Polar Align Pro, PS Align Pro, Polar Scope Align Pro. that I download onto my iPhone. I believe it's an iPhone app. There are other apps out there as well.
Hey, Tyler,
that allow you,
if you're listening, can you grab the correct mount so we can show him how to use it?
So we'll see if he's watching or not.
Yeah.
So it's still hard to show because you can't see what the reticle looks like. So, and then you can program it to look like the reticle in that scope. So on PS Line Pro, it's called the old Skywatcher Celestron Meade old something, and you'll find it looks just like the one in a reticle, and then it shows you exactly how you should rotate it to find it. Now if you there's all sorts of engines out there that should show you, if you'll search for hour angle of Polaris, it'll show you the current hour angle at that time, meaning like on a clock, right? So it's 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12. And the hour angle talks about what hour angle it is. That's the easiest way I have found to use it that way. Now, understand, because you're looking through a telescope, everything in the eyepiece you look at of the finder scope is upside down and backwards. So if it shows the hour angle of Polaris, just as you're looking up into the sky, and it says at 2 o'clock, you're going to have to put the hour angle of Polaris at 7 o'clock. I am way out of focus, Paul. Hot dang. There we go. Came back into focus. So it's a...
It's auto.
Yeah. So it's an interesting...
No one running this camera.
It's a skill to learn, and with astrophotography, there are ways, routines in some programs that SharpCap comes to mind, the first one, that will actually go through a polar alignment routine as well. Now, those are all assuming something that we haven't talked about much, and that is cone error. So, if my left hand is pointing directly at Polaris, right, but my telescope's pointed off over here, 3 degrees to the east, that means every polar alignment is going to be off by 3 degrees, or every go-to is going to be off by 3 degrees. Same thing on this mount, any mount, same thing. This difference is called cone error. You have to work to get your telescope and your polar finder scope, or polar axis, aligned to the same point in the sky. That will help you get a better polar alignment as well. I hope that makes sense as well. Ramesh, the counterweight and bars should be under the telescope. When the mount arrives, put that back up. I just saw it, Paul. When the mount arrives, you have to unlock the clutches and turn the weight to be under the telescope. Absolutely, sir.
It's Annie.
Oh, that's Annie. She must have just copied and pasted it for us. Thank you, Annie. So, yes, this is the 0 position. This is the home position. But to polar align it, you have to, and I'm going to do it the way with counterweights on. You turn it this way. It opens up the port so you can see through the polar finder scope,
other
or
mount.
in this case, the polar tunnel. And then
on the other mount, just be specific.
Yes, on the other mount. Well, it's the same thing. It's either you open the port here, right, or you it opens the port on the Exos 100 so the polar finder scope. You open the port on the Exos 100 so the polar tunnel, a little 2-degree tunnel you can look through, or it opens up so the finder scope can go through on the Exos 2 GT with PMC8, and then you polar align it like that and get the correct hour angle, and then you move the telescope up and down, right, in altitude, and left and right, and I'm going to loosen this a little bit, left and right, and you can move it just a wee bit and align it and get it polar aligned. Well, on the Exos 100, Polaris, the correct hour angle of Polaris is just inside of the circle you see at the visual hour angle. On the Exos 2 GT with PMC8 finder scope, it's upside down and backwards. That's why it's easier to use an app that shows you exactly how it should be. And you move the mount left, right, up, and down until you get the there's a little circle in there on the reticle. For people who haven't seen it, it's hard to explain. There's a little circle in there. And in 1990, when the mount was built, Polaris went in the exact middle. Now it goes on the edge of the circle closer to the polar alignment mark, which is like a cross with a long leg. There's a circle here. It goes on this side of the circle. Once you get that in the right spot, the better aligned you have the hour angle and everything else, the mount is now polar aligned, and now you simply rotate the telescope back to the home position, the park position, and make sure everything's good. And these are clutches. You lock the locks. Look in the telescope. Make sure you're looking at Polaris is in the field of view of the telescope, and off you go. Now, you might be off a little bit, but you can left, right, up, and down it. Ramesh, I hope this is making sense. It's hard to describe this. You know, this used to be a skill that was just sort of everybody learned from people who had already mastered it. That's how I learned it. The thing is, with astrophotography really taking over a lot of astronomy, amateur astronomy, more and more people are doing it with polar alignment routines on programs, and they're using guide scopes. So even if they're not really, really close to a great polar alignment, the guide scope can handle it with no trouble at all.
But you could also do a 2 or 3 star alignment, right?
Correct. Thank you, Paul.
That may be his
great idea.
solution.
If he's using Explore Stars, you know, get it as close as you can.
It's a free app.
Well, yeah, Explore Stars is an app from us. You can find it on the Google Play Store for Android, on the Apple App Store for your tablet, or on a Windows, the Microsoft Store for a Windows desktop, laptop, or tablet.
That's what I'm going to start doing. Whenever I'm out, I'm going to try to get a decent polar alignment by eyeballing it, and then I'm going to learn how to do a 2 and 3 star alignment, and I should be good, right?
Okay. Absolutely. So Ramesh says, thank you, Ken. I can relate what you said. You know, if you have some more trouble, contact us through the chat function, or go to Amazon, Explore Scientific Store on Amazon. I see you're on another platform. You can contact us, you know, through those platforms as well. So where were we? Polar alignment. Oh, yeah, 3 stars. So if you're using Explore Stars, which we recommend for visual, not for astrophotography, but people use it for that.
It'll work just the same for
astrophotography. Or
astrophotography.
3-star routine, alignment routine. If you pick 2 stars, it takes off immediately to go into the 1st star. So I go into settings and turn off auto alignment on. It's on the very top row in the settings, Ramesh. I turn auto align off, and that way when I say 2-star alignment, it pops up a star, and I go, I can't see that one. There's a tree in the way. I keep going next until I find one I see or I know, and then I go to, and it goes to it. Then you're going to use the left, right, up, down buttons until you get centered up, and you don't hit sync, you hit enter. You hit enter, and then it goes to the next star, the 2nd star alignment, and you're going to keep going until you pick a star that you can see or you're certain which one it is, and then you go to it. And when you use left, right, up, and down, and you hit enter again, you have now built what's called a transform. It's a mathematical model of how far off of polar alignment you are. Now, the better off, the more you center that star precisely in the eyepiece circle, and that's where going to high power can make your alignments much better. You start with a small one, you work your way up to a high-powered one, left, right, up, down, get it centered, hit enter.
How much magnification do you think you need to get high power?
Hang on a second. I want to go through this routine first, and I'll answer that question. And when you go to the 2nd star, go back to a wider field, lower power eyepiece, and go up to a higher power. 10 millimeters would be plenty. You know, if you're starting out like
a 6?
A 30 millimeter. If a 6, if you got it, I mean, the more you can get, the more precisely you can be in centering it, the better the transform is going to be, right?
Okay.
And so, and you're going to
I
go
think
from
that's
like a 20
s-
to a 10 to a 6 would be
Yeah.
a good progression.
I think that's a solve for me because I'm on uneven ground when I'm out at my darkest sky.
That's why it's extremely important to have your tripod level, because with a good level tripod, your go-tos are going to be better. And there's Tyler walking in here with nothing. What's he got? Oh, he's looking for his microphone. Must be getting ready for a show. So anyway, that's how you do a polar alignment.
256.
256, got a couple of minutes. So if you don't have a telescope, but if you do have a DSLR, single lens reflex camera, you can do this with the Exos 100. Get yourself a camera adapter, should be over in the carousel, and we're going to put this on our Canon camera, which is an old Canon camera, 10 years old. So old we can't use it for a studio broadcast camera.
I'm going to try.
Paul's still trying to figure out how to do
I've
it.
got to get the right cord.
So I'm going to tighten this down, and it's got a paint can bail handle on it. Get it tight, and now I'm going to...
There's Mike showing it.
Huh?
I got Mike showing it. See?
Oh, okay, on a video? Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go. So we're going to attach this, and we're going to balance it. Come on. There we go. Now I know about where to put it to make it balanced. And this is the beauty. And this is originally what the Exos 100 was designed for, was to use a digital single lens reflex camera that you already own. So
I was told that's not true.
They designed it as a DSLR and small telescopes. It was designed with DSLRs and small telescopes in mind.
I was told it was just for telescopes, and people started using it for DSLRs and SLRs.
I think it was done with both in mind. That's my understanding.
Well,
I could be completely wrong. I've been wrong. I was wrong twice this morning before I woke up, according to my wife.
Once I thought I was wrong, but I was just mistaken.
But then you knew you were right.
But then I was just mistaken.
He once thought he was wrong, but then he knew he was right. Sort of the same thing. All right. So
I'm
we've
always
got
right.
this set up. Now we can start doing astrophotography with a camera you already own and the IXOS 100 mount. A great combination, nice light camera. You can put on heavier lenses. This is a 24 to 105 millimeter camera. Now, if I'm going to use it at 105 millimeters, I'm going to use gaffer's tape or painter's tape once I get it out there to tape down the ring that operates the zoom, because it'll sit there and it'll slide back in and ruin all your shots, right? Same with the focus. I'm going to work and get a focus as best I can.
It's called lens creep.
Lens
and
creep.
It's
a good term.
It's very much a thing in the photography world.
Focus creep is the same thing. It can start changing focus, so you're going to take
focus
it down
creep.
as well.
You need to get a new lens.
Well, or in this case, tape down the focusing ring so it doesn't move as well. And now, what do? You point it at the south. You do an execute a go-to to a star in the south, and maybe let's say Antares, and you frame up a shot on Antares in the evening after Antares comes up, and you set your ISO for 1600, f-stop at f5.6 or 4.5, and take a 30-second exposure and see what happens.
I suggest using an f8 to an f16 and a higher ISO if your camera will allow it.
It's ISO and f-stop and shutter speed are balances, right? You get them into balance and it's the same thing, but it has differences involved. We're not going into technical details. So,
from a photographer's standpoint,
because this is a go-to mount,
close that lens.
It's continuing to track across the sky, right? And so normally, if you just set it on a tripod and you left it open for a minute, you're going to get star blur. But because it's tracking across the sky and you've got a decent polar alignment, it's going to track it across the sky, pointed at the same spot, and you're going to get longer exposures. So that's how you get started doing this. Paul in the landscape world, Paul is exactly right. In the sky world, his principles are correct. However, because of tracking problems and scene problems and other things,
I don't
mostly
know.
tracking.
We talked. Who was the guy that was on Tyler's program the other day?
Gary Palmer.
Gary Palmer. He didn't necessarily agree with me, but he also didn't disagree.
Oh, it'll work. You just have to have longer exposures,
Or a better ISO capable camera.
which traditionally yields more noise.
But let's say I throw a red Scarlet on there and use it in photo mode.
Red Scarlet.
Yeah, it's a film camera, but it captures 16-bit color depth, right? It's a $50,000 camera. Or put a Hasselblad on there.
Different story. Different story.
The ISO at 3200 is perfect.
Different story.
The same thing is
If I
for
put
the
a
new
$400
Sonys.
I put a $400 Canon
Yeah,
EOS Rebel on it.
You're not going to get that.
Different
You're going to
story.
need a 2-minute exposure.
Dude,
Yeah.
And that's pro level stuff, and we're not talking about pro level stuff.
The
We're talking about getting
A7
started.
the A7 III that's on this, that's recording you right now.
Right.
Its native ISO is 800.
No problem with that.
It can go to 3500 without any noise.
But it also has a built-in noise reduction feature on every picture you take. And
That is not a problem. They fixed that in
have
Sony.
they fixed it?
Yeah.
And it eats stars. This camera
anymore.
eats the stars.
The old ones would. If you had a
there you
Sony
go.
Alpha or like an A7,
Yeah.
then
Star eats.
yes, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
But on the new A7 III or anything newer than that, or even the A7 II, they
technology-
fixed it with the update.
Technology changes all the time.
Yeah.
I will agree that things were absolutely true and inviolate. You couldn't violate it 20 years ago.
No. Yeah.
It's a completely different story today.
Yes.
And I think things are moving towards the direction you're talking about. But for the average person with a DSLR they already own,
It's
You can't
only
shoot it.
$1,500 for the A7
can't
III.
shoot. yeah, and for a lot of people that's
It's expensive.
it's
I
expensive.
know.
And so, if they're using a 10-year-old camera, F8 or F16's probably going to create problems for them.
Just for an example,
Because they're
you
not
could
using
put-
a guide camera.
you can put your iPhone on this thing, and
Sure.
it would work.
If you have an app that'll let you control the shutter speed, you can take long
Yeah.
exposures
No.
with it.
The
Absolutely.
new Apple iPhones, I think 7 Plus and up, you can control your shutter speed.
With an app, yes.
No, it's internal.
You'll have to show me how to do it on my iPhone because I don't know.
I'll show
I've
you.
tried to
It's
find
not-
it and I've never found it
It
internally.
may even, which one do you have?
11 Max. or
It'll do it
11
on that.
Pro.
I
huh?
did it. I had the 11 for a year and a half, and I did that in app
Well, you have to show me.
in camera.
All right, I've got to go in a meeting with Scott, so off we go.
Off we go.
Everybody, thanks for joining us. We appreciate the
And Beatrice
questions.
is right. If you haven't, especially if you have an older camera, always tape down your focus and your
Dude,
zoom.
Always do it no matter what. The other thing is keep notes on every picture you take. The first picture was this shutter speed, this ISO, this f-stop. And keep notes on what you're doing so you can go back and look. Because, look, if you find something that worked and you're 33 different exposures in, you don't remember what it was. So write that down. That's the difference between playing around and doing science. Thank you to Adam
Beatrice.
Savage.
Oh, Adam Savage.
Was it Adam Savage or Jamie Heineman? I think it was Adam Savage. Thank you for Jamie Savage of Mythbusters for that great example. The difference between science and play is when you're doing science, you write it down. So write down your exposures so you can go, hey, that worked. This one's the best. Now you've got a starting point you can start refining things from. Anyway, for Paul Newton over in the Magic Studio Land and Noah Menard, I normally say, hey, Noah, wave. And Noah would wave, but he can't say it to him because he's not over at his desk. and everybody else here at Explore Scientific. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow at 2 o'clock Central Time for On the Wing. Boy, couldn't come up with it.
On the Wing.
Been doing it for almost a year now, and finally came up with On the Wing. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great Wednesday afternoon, evening, night, wherever it is and whatever it is you are, and see you tomorrow. Bye-bye, everybody.